Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we'll see how to create a Spring Boot REST API that handles HTTP delete request. Well, basically client sends this HTTP delete request to delete the existing resource. Okay. For example, if you can notice here, consider we are using Postman REST client to make a REST API call. And whenever a client make a HTTP delete request, then client have to send a delete HTTP method in a request and the URL. For example, look at the URL here. Localhost /8000/student/student ID and then the delete operation. Okay, so typically we use this kind of URL, and client don't have to send any data in the request body in case of HTTP delete request. Now let's go ahead and let's write the Spring Boot REST API. It will handle this kind of HTTP delete request. So let me go to IntelliJ IDEA over here and let me go to student controller. Within that, let's write the Spring Boot REST API that handles HTTP delete request. So let me write the comment first. Spring Boot REST API that handles HTTP delete request. So this request basically is for deleting the existing resource. Perfect. Next, let's type public and let's give a return type of the method as something like string, and let's give method name as delete student. All right, and let's pass student ID as a method argument. Perfect. Next let's return a success message in the response. For example, let's say student deleted successfully. All right, perfect. Now we have created delete student method. Let's make this method as a REST API by using @delete mapping annotation. So let's go ahead and let's annotate this method with @delete mapping annotation. Well, we use @delete mapping annotation to map incoming HTTP delete request to this URL. Next, let's go and let's configure the URL for this REST API. So let's type students/ and then student ID delete. So this is the delete REST API, hence we need to pass delete operation name. Okay, and if you can notice in the URL we have a URI template variable, that is ID, right? We need to bind a value of this URI template variable to this method argument, isn't it? For that we are going to use @path variable annotation. So here let me use @path variable annotation. Next, if you can see the URI template variable name and the method argument name, so both are different, hence we need to pass a URI template variable name to the @path variable annotation. Alright, perfect. Now we have created Spring Boot REST API that handles HTTP delete request. Next, let me print this student ID to the console just to make sure that this REST API will get a student ID from this URL. Okay, so here let me put the sysout and let me simply print student ID. Okay, so basically in real-time project, this REST API have to delete a student record from the database by using this student ID. But in this example, we are just printing the student ID to the console just to make sure that this REST API will receive this student ID from the client. Okay, now let me start the Spring Boot application again and let me test this REST API. So if you can see here, our Spring Boot application is up and running in embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Next, let's go ahead and let's head over to the Postman REST client and let's create a new request to call the delete REST API. So here let's choose a delete HTTP method and just type the URL http localhost 8080/student/student ID and then delete. Well, in case of HTTP delete request, a client don't have to send a data in a body. Okay, perfect. Next, let's go and click on send button over here, and there we go. You can able to see a client got a success response, that is student deleted successfully. And if you can notice here, the HTTP status code 200 OK. Well, remember, whenever you develop the Spring Boot REST API that handles HTTP delete request, then your REST API have to return a HTTP status code 200 OK in a response. Okay, and you don't have to manually specify the HTTP status code 200 OK in a response, because Spring Boot will automatically provide by default the status code 200 OK in a response of the REST API.